for another What We Read.
That's
I'm really
right.
excited
Super
about this
good.
one.
Yeah.
So many good things for me
So
to
many
talk
good
about.
things for her to talk about.
Okay,
so let's get started.
Kick things off. We're gonna talk first about a very gigantic book series, The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear.
There you go.
Which are both by Patrick Rothfuss. I actually listened to them on audio this time. This was a reread for me. I actually read it at the beginning of this year, and this was a new to me read. And combined, there are a lot of pages. It's like 1,600 pages total, which is a little bit insane. I almost want to summarize the story by saying the main character Kvothe is basically a little shit. Because he is. These two novels are 2 days of him telling his life story to a chronicler. And so you kind of get to see him from when he is basically a child up until the point that he is now at a school, I guess a school for magic is what we'll call it, and also making his way in the world. I liked the first book just a teensy bit more, but the second book, on the other hand, kind of opens up Kvothe's journey to put him in a place where he is now out in the world and not in this school. He has now cultivated some knowledge and some skills and has utilized those things to make his way in the world in this book. And I really just enjoy this story, and I think for me that's primarily because I love Kvothe. Yes, he's a little shit, but I love him. Like he just has this very compelling personality to read about. He's not perfect. He doesn't always sugarcoat his actions here. Like sometimes he'll try to spin it to make it look good, but for the most part he's just like, this is what I did. This is what happened. And it's not always smart, or it's not always the best choice, but you can understand where he's coming from considering his history and his personality. It's great. I really enjoy it. I think it's going to be so interesting to see how Rothfuss completes this story, because the last book is supposed to be the third day of his storytelling and where we find out a lot of the big plot points. Now that I've read these first two, I've been sent by Kristen from Super Spaceship. She sent me a bunch of like things about theories people have, connections people have made, and it's ultimately so fascinating because Patrick Rothfuss really took the time to craft this story to spread details and like throwaway lines and things that don't seem to have any purpose, but then they start making sense the deeper you get into the story, and that's so interesting. A big part of this story is Kvothe's interest in learning a type of magic. It's basically naming, and you are able to call things by their real name. That's why the first book is called The Name of the Wind, because he's trying to learn what the name of the wind is.
I kind of want to read this already.
And the other thing that I love about Kvothe is he's also very fascinated with music. So that is a big part of his story as well, and it makes it so interesting. It's so compelling. I personally really enjoyed it. There is a section of this book that I could probably have done without, because like I'm just like, really? Had to happen? I'm like, okay, because you needed to acquire this thing, but whatever. I didn't particularly love it. I do think that it's a really interesting adult fantasy. I can see why so many people love it. I love it. I am really looking forward to the third book. God only knows when it's going to come out, but I cannot wait. I also would highly recommend the audiobook. Like I was surprised because I generally am okay with listening to audiobooks even though I don't love the narrators, but this one I thought he did a good job with Kvothe and telling his story. It was very interesting, and I cannot wait to read the third one. Before I turn things over to Mackie, I do have one more book I want to quickly talk about, and that is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Ngan, which I reread this year in preparation for the sequel. So Girls of Paper and Fire is about a character named Lei, and she is taken from her small town to become a paper girl, one of the Beast King's concubines. Because in this world, there are different castes. There is the paper caste where you are fully human. There is the moon caste where you have animal beastly features and traits. And then there is the moon... No, that was the steel caste. Sorry, the steel caste is the second caste. The third caste is the moon caste where you are basically full-on beastly with the traits and the appearance and everything, and a little bit of human in you. So Lei is taken from her village and she's brought to the king to become the 9th paper girl in this time. Normally there are only 8, and she's the 9th because she has a feature that makes her extra attractive to the king. And she spends a couple of months in the palace as a paper girl, and while she's there she slowly starts to learn of the seed of revolution that is sprouting in their country, and in the end she is forced to make a choice of whether she is going to fight or flee. I still really love this story. I read this one last year, absolutely loved it. I think it's so fascinating because it's the story of this girl. She had no personal stake in what was going on in her country, and what was important to her was just to, you know, to keep her family safe, to be safe herself, and to find her freedom. And over the course of this story, she comes to care more and to open her eyes more to what's going on in the world around her, and to see this oppression and injustice that suddenly she feels that kindles her on the inside to become a part of this revolution and to do something because she can. She is in a position where she can do something. And it's just so interesting to follow that character journey the entire time. I will say that this one is maybe not going to be for everyone, because I know some people are not going to want to read a story where there's a lot of violence against women, against people of different cultures. There's a lot of sexual abuse in that one. It's hard to read at times, and even I found it hard to read, even knowing that it was coming going into it. But it's such a fascinating story, and Natasha Ngan's writing, I had forgotten how fluidly it flows when you're reading it and how beautiful it is. So I personally would still recommend checking it out, with the caveat that you should know all those trigger warnings going into it. It's a good story, and I'm maybe a fourth of the way through the sequel, and it's also really good so far, so we'll see if that holds up. But yeah, would definitely recommend checking out Girls of Paper and Fire. Awesome. All right, I'm gonna turn things over to Maki real quick before we get to other things.
As I mentioned in the last one we read, I did a huge Rick Riordan book binge, and I ended up, in the span of just a few days, probably our entire trip to Australia.
Yeah, that was all you were
finished
reading.
The entire Heroes of Olympus series, which is the next 5 books that happened after the first 5 Percy Jackson books that I had just read.
There's a new catalyst for the plot of these books that still involve Percy and the gang.
But at the same time, it expands the world so in ways where you're like, what in the world just happened there? And so I would like to think that you would not appreciate these books. I mean, they pretty much stand alone as much as they can, because the way Rick Riordan sort of does, writes these things, is that if you're absolutely new to the entire series, you can still sort of pick it up, because that's how The Lost Hero actually starts. You've got a bunch of new characters that you've never met before. One of them in particular has no memory of anything, and it sort of centers on him. It diverges away it diverges from the Percy Jackson series, where you're just focused on one character, and here now it's multiple POVs all throughout all five books. And so you're looking at it through the new hero's perspectives, whatever ways that they bring. So is it all of the good stuff that Rick Riordan had? Yes, great plot, great storytelling. Is it as visceral maybe as, you're a little boy or a little girl and everything's out to get you? No, because the world has expanded since then. So like I said,
this is like a proper fantasy story.
Yeah, it's a proper fantasy story right now. I can honestly say that if you didn't know the first 5 books, you wouldn't appreciate this as much as you should and could.
It would hit you differently.
It would absolutely hit you differently. And it has all of the hallmarks. It's got a great big prophecy.
Still funny.
It's got, funny characters. It's got characters you're going to love. It's got huge emotional payoffs.
And it's still got those ties between the real world and mythological world.
Yeah, and if there's one thing that I was reminded here, is because the only thing I remember here is that I love the new characters so much and I wanted to be one of them. But with all of these new faces and journeys, I never appreciated Percy as much as I did rereading these books again. I honestly had very little appreciation for Percy in comparison to how much I love him now. I want to be Percy Jackson, basically. I didn't used to be.
That's a change.
I know, that is a shock. That is a huge, huge shocker. I want to be Percy Jackson, especially after the stuff that he's actually done here. Highly recommend to anybody who's a fan of the series. Much recommend that anybody who starts this series, who wants to get into this, read the first 5 books first, because they are worth the read, so that you can get the full payoff of how magnificent this thing is. Do read them. They're wonderful.
They are. I also read another series ender recently, and we're going to talk about it. That book is Capturing the Devil by Carrie Maniscalco. This is the last book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. So this entire series has centered around 2 main characters, Audrey Rose and Thomas Cresswell, and they are apprenticed to a forensic specialist, and so they both are interested in learning more about forensics and taking part in helping use forensics to solve different murder cases. So each of the books has followed a different murder mystery, and this one is slightly different in that it also follows a different one, but it's connected to one of the other murder mysteries. Spoilers for 1, 2, and 3. In this book, the characters are actually in the US. They started out in New York and they're investigating a series of murders there, and they find a connection to one of the past murders. I can't say more than that. I can see why this one has a lot of fans of the series divided, because on the one hand, it is great for those of us who love Audrey Rose and Thomas Cresswell as partners and as a pair, because there is a lot of screen time with the 2 of them in here and how they're navigating their relationship and elevating that relationship to the next level. Like, there is still a lot for them to sort through and a lot for them to overcome before they can properly, be together, and that happens to be a big chunk of this book. However, the mystery, on the other hand, is different than the others in that it's not a new mystery. In many ways, it's still a part of the plot, but it feels like it falls a little bit more to the wayside in comparison to the other 3 books, because the focus is more on them, the 2 of them as characters, particularly Audrey Rose and her own personal demons. as she tries to help solve this case. It does sort of shift back in focus to the mystery once we hit the last, I want to say like 1/8 of the story, and it makes sense to like have that be the big moment there. But at the same time, I can see why fans are a little bit divided on this one. I personally enjoyed it. I think that it was an interesting way to end this saga of Audrey Rose and Thomas Cresswell. I think it couldn't have gone any other way at this point, and I like how Carrie Maniscalco used historical facts and facts that are still like they end in questions, and she kind of combined them to make the story wrap up the way it did. So I still really enjoyed it. It's not my favorite of the series. That honor still goes to the second book, Hunting Prince Dracula, but I definitely think that this one is a close second, just for me enjoying how much we get to see of all these characters that I truly enjoy, but particularly get to spend time with Audrey Rose and Thomas. And yeah, I would still highly recommend checking out this series. It's so fascinating. It's very different from anything I've really read. It's historical fiction with a murder mystery in pretty much every single book, even this one, even in a minor level. It was really fun. Oh, in terms of the mystery, I kind of guessed the answer to it probably like halfway through the book, but that didn't deter my enjoyment of how it all wrapped up in the end. So definitely check that one out. And now we're gonna talk about my newest obsession. When we went to Orlando with my family, I had like fully intended to just like read one of them because I had borrowed them. Like I used Scribd and got ebooks for some of them, and I was like, I'm just gonna read one. Cut to, I ended up reading while we were in Orlando, I ended up reading 2.5 probably of the books, and then I ended up going straight into another one, and I'm talking about, ooh, I can't even hold it.
Here, let me.
Books 2 to 5 of the Keeper of the Lost City series. So we have Exile, Everblaze, Neverseen, and Lodestar. Where to even begin with these books? So Keeper of the Lost Cities...
That you know my pain now?
Keeper of the Lost Cities is a series that centers around Sophie Foster, who in the first book it discovers that she is actually an elf.
Yeah.
And so she is taken to this whole other world and introduced to this whole new life where she has to learn how to properly harness her abilities as an elf, what it means for her that she's an elf. She has to basically say goodbye to the family that she grew up with. It's a whole lot of things. And then she finds out that she's also the center of this other plot within the world of the elves.
Which is a giant conspiracy that just keeps unfolding as we speak. It's really great.
All of the things that Mackie has talked about before for reasons why he loves the series are true of me as well. I really enjoy how Shannon Messenger takes things and just puts a tiny spin on them, and you're like, huh, I never thought of that. I like her take on elves. I enjoy it quite as much, and the magic and the stuff that happens in the setting, it's all really fun for me. And I also really like the plot and how with every book it suddenly seems to get bigger and bigger in a way that makes sense. Like it's not just like forced into the story.
Yeah, it's literally like gradual unraveling.
Crap, I didn't notice that earlier, and now.
Which makes sense because you're from the point of view of the kids, and so as the world unravels before them, so too does the story. So it's pretty cool and organic.
But my favorite thing about the story, obviously, are the characters in it. I have such a soft spot for, I've said this many times already, but I have such a soft spot for friendship groups that feel like families.
Oh, hell yeah.
And in this story, especially in these last 2 books, like the friendship group just feels like a little family, and their family also has like come together and become a little family unit of their own, and it's great and it's wonderful. I enjoy reading about all of them so much, and every time there's a new addition to that group, I'm just like, I love you already, even though they haven't been there for very long. The frustrating thing to me is very similar to Mackie's frustrating thing, except that mine is not nearly as severe. There are just times when the relationships take a turn, particularly one relationship in it, and that's the main ship that a lot of people are aware of. And sometimes the focus on it is a little too much for me, and I'm like, please stop, please stop, please stop.
That's
but I'm also extremely biased.
I can't, like, that's why reading the last book hurts so much, because it literally is like, oh, how nice to, ugh, here they go again.
But I'm extremely biased. I'm also a crew member of the other ship that's sort of non-existent, except in certain people's minds. That sometimes will throw me out of the story just a little bit, not even that badly. But for the most part, like, it is impossible for me to stop reading once I've started one of these. Like, I read all of these so fast, and they're over 600 pages long, and I'm just like, it's because I just need to know. Like, how Sophie and her friends are gonna fix something or overcome something, like what they're gonna do now, what's gonna happen next. Like, even after finishing this one, like, at the end of it, I'm like, what the...
Yeah.
That literally me. Actually, it was especially with Neverseen.
Oh god.
It ends, and I'm like, that was literally.
She comes yelling to me from wherever room she's in to wherever room I'm at, and she's like, "How did you?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's totally how they ended that."
Yeah, and then this book happens, and I'm like, This is literally putting me through pain.
I am all elfed out, but I swear when I'm healed, I am going to jump straight back into the last book.
I think for me, like, it's been so long since I've been super invested in a middle grade series like this. Like, the last time I can remember is really Rick Riordan stuff.
That's
like,
true, yeah.
Where I was like
to this level, to this degree of yelling.
And angry, and I'm just like, and I care too much.
I mean, general enjoyment is one thing, but to actually like yell and like kick and scream.
It's been so long since that happened. So for that alone, like, I would highly recommend the series if you're interested in middle grade.
Yeah, believe the hype. It's all over the thing right now.
It's so good, and like, I don't even know what's gonna happen next, and I'm already here for it, even though I know it'll bring me pain. So highly recommend. And I'm so glad like Mackie and Kristen both talked me into trying the series.
It works. Yeah. Plus, if you like elves, then you're in for a treat.
Oh, it's so good. Anyway, those are all the books we have to talk about for this edition of What We Read. If you read any of the books we mentioned in the video, we'd love to hear your comments. If you have like theory videos or posts that you want to link me to for The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear, I'm here for it.
If you want to commiserate about how well Rick Riordan manages several points of view and makes more characters that you love, let me know. Feeling the love here.
Alright, and we will see you guys with another What We Read soon. Bye!